We knew we had to fight. We had to do whatever to survive.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Today's story is chilling, filled with terror, bravery, with an ending you won't see coming. Please consider subscribing. Now, let's begin. In February of 2016, two young backpackers set off on what they thought would be the adventure of a lifetime across Australia. But what began as an exciting journey quickly turned into a nightmare that neither of them could ever have imagined. Lena, a 23-year-old backpacker from Germany, Lena had dreamed of exploring Australia for as long as she could remember. She was captivated by the idea of its stunning landscapes, vibrant culture, and the promise of new adventures. So, in 2016, Lena packed her bags, left her home behind, and made her way to Australia with excitement in her heart. But there's a twist. Before Lena left, she watched the infamous movie Wolf Creek, the chilling story of backpackers traveling through Australia only to be hunted by a ruthless killer. She watched it with a friend, and when the credits rolled, her friend voiced the fear that haunted every backpacker. What if it happened in real life? Lena laughed it off, assuring her friend that it was just a fictional story, based on something that had happened long ago. But the seed of fear was planted. Little did she know, the danger wasn't just confined to the silver screen. Lena's adventure took her to a hostel in Adelaide, where she met Beatrix, a fellow 23-year-old backpacker from Brazil. They clicked instantly, bonding over their shared age and mutual love for travel. Soon they discovered they had the same dream: to drive from Adelaide to Melbourne, taking in the breathtaking beauty of the Great Ocean Road along the way. The Great Ocean Road spans 1,000 kilometers, about 620 miles, a journey that would usually take 13 to 14 hours of non-stop driving. Most travelers, however, take 5 days to make the trip, camping along the route and soaking in the stunning sights. For Lena and Beatrix, the journey seemed like the perfect way to experience Australia together. But there was one problem: they didn't have a car. In Australia, it's common for travelers to use platforms like Facebook or Gumtree to find companions or travel partners. Lena and Beatrix posted an ad, hoping to find someone with a car who would be willing to share the drive and the gas money. They received a few responses, but one stood out: a man their age, offering to take them on the journey. Everything seemed perfect, until he canceled last minute due to car troubles. With their plans thrown into chaos, Lena and Beatrix returned to their ad, searching for someone else. The only person who replied was a 59-year-old man named Roman Hines. His messages were odd, sometimes demanding quick replies, and he had a tendency to pressure the girls when they didn't respond fast enough. Still, they had no other options. Reluctantly, they agreed to go with him. On February 9th, 2016, they met Roman at a predetermined location. The sun was bright, and the air was thick with anticipation as the three of them loaded their bags into his car. What they didn't know was that they were stepping into the car of one of Australia's most dangerous and violent criminals. Roman Hines was born in West Germany and had moved to Australia with his family in 1959. He had been married twice, with both marriages ending in divorce, and had 5 children. Despite his family life, Roman had a dark side, a history of violence and anger issues that should have raised red flags. In 2014, he was convicted of assaulting a woman in his car, but instead of serving time, he was placed on a good behavior bond. He wasn't allowed to use electronic devices to contact people, but in December of 2014, he broke that condition and attacked another woman. But even more chilling, just a month before meeting Lena and Beatrice, Roman's ex-girlfriend, Sylvia Clark, stayed at his home one night. She woke up to find her left hand tied to the bed, and there he was, standing over her. What happened next is enough to make anyone's blood run cold. Roman beat her, bit her, and tried to assault her. Sylvia, terrified and too ashamed to report the attack, ended the relationship and canceled a planned trip with him. And now, just weeks later, Roman was about to take 2 young girls on a long journey, alone with him in his car. What they didn't know was that the road ahead would be far more terrifying than anything they had imagined. The three of them were steadily making their way to Melbourne when suddenly, without warning, Roman made a sharp turn off the main road, veering toward Salt Creek. It was a desolate place, isolated and tucked away in the southern part of Australia, about 164 kilometers from Adelaide. It wasn't the kind of place you'd visit unless you were prepared for the loneliness it offered, and perhaps for the darkness lurking there. Salt Creek was the kind of place where someone like Roman, with sinister intentions, could hide away from prying eyes. Roman pulled the car to a stop, announcing that they would be camping here for the night. The girls exchanged confused looks. There wasn't a single person in sight. But up until now, the drive had been pleasant, and Roman had been calm and patient, even letting them stop to take photos. They trusted him, or at least they thought they did. Roman went to work setting up camp while the girls observed. He was quiet, too quiet, and there was something off about him that they couldn't shake. Beatrix tried to push it aside and began helping him with the camp, but Lena, exhausted from the long drive, decided to rest in the car. While Lena slept, Roman turned to Beatrix. He mentioned spotting some kangaroo tracks in the sand, saying that he could help her track them down if she wanted some pictures. Trusting him, thinking this was just another part of the adventure, Beatrix agreed. The two of them ventured into the dunes, the vast empty land stretching out before them. They walked for what seemed like forever, but no kangaroos appeared. Eventually, Beatrix suggested they turn back. But as she started to walk away, Roman's grip tightened around her, his arm snaking around her neck from behind. He shoved her to the ground, his breath hot and heavy against her ear. He had been hiding a hammer and a knife in his pants, and now he pulled them out, along with some rope. His cold, twisted gaze told Beatrix everything she needed to know. He had no intention of letting her go. Roman warned her not to resist, threatening to break her arms if she did. Panic surged through Beatrix, but she tried to fight back, reaching for the rope. His grip on her tightened, his warning now turning to violence as he struck her over and over again. But as the blows landed, Beatrice's mind raced. She had to survive. She managed to speak, telling him that she was okay with whatever he wanted, as long as they returned to camp. Roman, caught off guard, agreed, thinking she had surrendered to him. He got her to her feet, and they began the walk back. But as they neared the camp, something in Roman's eyes shifted. He wasn't done yet. He turned her around, pulling her farther from the camp, and that's when Beatrix knew this was her last chance. She screamed, her voice breaking the stillness of the night, calling out for Lena. "Help me!" Her voice echoed across the dunes, desperate and raw. Roman's hands clenched into fists, and he began to beat her, trying to silence her once and for all. Lena, still in the car, was startled awake by the frantic screams. She bolted from the car, her heart pounding as she followed the sound. Her eyes locked on Beatrice, her friend crumpled in the sand, Roman looming over her. Shock froze Lena for just a moment, but then, with a burst of courage, she shouted, "Let her go!" Roman turned, his gaze now fixed on Lena. He advanced toward her with a sinister grin. Beatrix, barely able to speak, screamed for Lena to run, warning her that Roman was armed. Lena, filled with a primal fear, sprinted to the car to grab her phone, desperate to call for help. But Roman was faster than she realized. He snuck up behind her and struck her over the head with the hammer. The world spun as Lena crumpled to the ground, her vision blurred. Blood poured from the wound, mixing with the sand beneath her. Despite the pain and confusion, Lena didn't give up. She fought back with every ounce of strength she had left. The struggle was brutal. Roman was crazed, his strikes relentless. 3 more blows landed, each one worse than the last. But somehow, Lena managed to break free. She staggered to her feet, blood streaming down her face, and ran. Every step was a battle, but she kept going, determined to escape. Meanwhile, Roman returned to his car, starting the engine and speeding toward the 2 girls. Lena, still weak and injured, turned back to Beatrix, making sure she was okay. But they didn't have time to talk. The sound of Roman's car engine grew louder, and instinctively they split up, hoping to evade him. Beatrix ran into the dunes, finding a place to hide. Roman, though, had his sights set on Lena. He drove after her, relentless. Lena ran with everything she had left, zigzagging to avoid being run over. She could feel her strength slipping away with each step. The heat, the blood loss, and the exhaustion were taking their toll. She knew she couldn't keep outrunning him forever. But just as Roman was closing in on her, his car got stuck in the sand. Lena seized the moment. She turned and sprinted straight at his car, throwing herself onto the bonnet, then climbing onto the roof. Blood dripped from her head, staining the car as Roman screamed at her to get down. But then, something miraculous happened. Miles away, Beatrix heard the sound of a car. Her heart leapt. This could be her chance. A group of young men were driving by, and Beatrix, naked and terrified, ran into the road, waving her arms. The men, shocked and confused at first, quickly understood what was happening. Beatrix explained that Roman had assaulted her and that Lena was still in danger. They immediately called the police and drove toward the dunes to find Lena. As Roman stopped his car and exited, demanding that Lena come down, Lena made him a deal. She promised to climb down if he threw away his weapons. For a brief moment, Roman seemed to calm down. He threw his knives and hammer away, and Lena, weak but resolute, got into his car. But she knew she wasn't safe yet. As they drove down the beach, Lena spotted fishermen on the shore. She knew this was her last chance. With blood-soaked hands, she stuck her arm out of the car window and waved frantically. The fishermen, horrified by what they saw, sprang into action, chasing Roman's car. In a desperate attempt to escape, Roman tried to speed away, but the fishermen closed in. With nowhere to go, he stopped the car, and Lena, bloodied and broken, stepped out, her legs barely holding her up. Roman, realizing the end had come, didn't fight back. He simply drove off, leaving the girls behind. The nightmare was over. The girls were safe. But Roman, a predator on the run, had no idea what was coming for him next. The sound of sirens filled the air as the police arrived, rushing to the scene where the two women were. Lena was in bad shape. She had fought against Roman for hours, pushing herself beyond her limits despite her brutal injuries. She had lost so much blood that, by the time the doctors rushed her to the hospital, she had already slipped into unconsciousness. As the medical team worked feverishly to stabilize her, the search for Roman was in full swing. Adam Stewart, a local man who owned the only shop for miles, was called in to help the police. He knew the area like the back of his hand. Adam didn't hesitate. He had a strong hunch about where Roman might be, and within hours they found him. Roman's car was stuck in a sand dune, trapping him with nowhere to go. The police wasted no time and arrested him on the spot. Back at the hospital, Lena's condition was critical, but she was beginning to improve. Her head was stapled back together, but her appearance was unrecognizable. Covered in blood and sand, the doctors initially couldn't even tell if she was a man or a woman. It was only after a while that they could see her features again. As Lena drifted in and out of consciousness, she was overwhelmed by the harsh reality of everything she had endured. Meanwhile, Beatrix, though physically shaken, was by her side, and the two women were reunited. They held each other, realizing just how lucky they were to be alive. Roman was soon charged with multiple horrific crimes: aggravated kidnapping, indecent assault causing harm with intent, endangering life, false imprisonment, and assault. As news of the attack spread, Roman's ex-girlfriend Sylvia couldn't help but feel a deep, gnawing guilt. She had seen the name Roman and his photo in the papers, alongside the words Salt Creek, and a flood of remorse hit her. She couldn't shake the thought that if she had spoken out sooner, the attack could have been prevented. But she knew that the justice system had failed before, and she feared that even if she had come forward, nothing would have changed. Then it hit her. Roman had planned that trip to Salt Creek before they broke up. The horrifying realization washed over her. She could have been one of Roman's victims, too. In February of 2017, Roman's trial began in the Supreme Court of South Australia. The prosecution laid out the gruesome details, showing photographs of Lena's injuries and the bloodstains on the roof of Roman's car. Sylvia bravely came forward, recounting her own terrifying experience with Roman. She told the court about the time he had forced himself on her, and she even had photos of the bruises to prove it. But in a shocking turn, the judge ruled that Roman was not guilty of this crime, stating that no sexual assault had occurred. It was clear. Even if Sylvia had spoken up earlier, the justice system had failed to protect her too. The trial revealed even darker truths about Roman. It was discovered that he had been watching violent and illegal content online, particularly involving women. His social media chat logs were exposed in court, revealing that he had been in contact with at least 12 other backpackers, offering them rides around Australia. It became painfully obvious that Roman was a serial killer in the making. Roman was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison, where he will likely remain for the rest of his life. The courage and quick thinking of Lena and Beatrice saved their lives that day. It's a miracle they survived, but they didn't do it alone. The men who risked their lives to help them, not knowing if Roman was armed, are heroes in their own right. It's a stark reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are still people willing to help. However, as the story unfolded, new witnesses came forward with chilling information. Months before the attack, they had seen Roman at a store in Salt Creek with a young girl, most likely a backpacker, in his car. Days later, Roman returned alone, but the girl was nowhere to be seen. Despite the ongoing investigation, no one knows who that girl was, but it's believed that she's buried somewhere in the dunes of Salt Creek, her fate lost to the desert sands. Roman's past remains a mystery, and the true extent of his crimes may never be fully known. But one thing is certain. The bravery of Lena, Beatrice, and the strangers who helped them ensured that Roman's reign of terror would come to an end. And while justice was served, the haunting questions of what happened to that young girl will linger in the shadows forever. What do you think about this terrifying case? Do you believe justice was truly served, or do you think the system failed in some way? And what about the unidentified backpacker? Do you think the truth will ever come to light? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share your opinion in the comments below. Your perspective is important, and respectful discussions are always welcome here. If you found this story interesting, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us continue bringing you real crime stories that deserve to be told. Thank you for watching.